All right. T-minus 1 minute. So you guys know this is going to be broadcast maybe if it doesn't fall off the table. Not only locally, but it's obviously going to be broadcast throughout Facebook Live, on Periscope. So what we're doing is going to be seen nationally. And you guys are part of this here live, and I can't commend you enough for coming out on a Friday night to hear about the Constitution, to start learning it, to understand it. I apologize if I'm in your way. If you guys need to get up or whatever, tell me to move my big head, feel free. But this is where it starts. This is where this is all going to start. When we stopped teaching civics in high school and in middle school and elementary school, even at the foundation level, you know, what we did was we alienated ourselves from our birthrights as Americans. Because what you're going to learn tonight was passed to us a long, long, long time ago. Really, we're at about 1,000 years to where freedom and liberty started, where people started to push back against tyrants, and where we started to see citizens rise up and kings recede a little bit. And so what we're going to learn tonight is a basis for where we came from. And this is important because what everybody has seen throughout history is tyrants push and push and push their citizens to the point where the citizens get uncomfortable enough to say enough is enough. This has got to stop. And at that point, when they rise up, when they unify and they come together with one voice, and they say, as long as you're not hurting anybody and you're leaving everybody else alone, you're free to live your life. That is a profound statement. And it's something that people have been trying to do for over 1,000 years, where they started codifying it for 1,000 years. And what is so important about that is now that we have a constitutional republic and not a kingdom, we have the means to throw off tyrants, usurping tyrants, without picking up arms. And it happens at the ballot box. And we owe it to the next generation, these young guys in the back here, over here. This generation, we owe it to them to solve this peacefully. Because I've seen war firsthand, lots of it. I don't want to see it here ever, because people aren't ready for it. They have no idea how hellish war can be in your neighborhood. Your sisters, your brothers, your cousins, your nephews, your kids, your grandparents. Everybody will be affected. And sometimes, I guess that's what it takes. But we still have a chance, as Churchill said, to do it peacefully. And if you won't fight when peace is a chance, you're going to have to fight when the odds are stacked against you. And there may come a time when you have no chance, but it is better to die than live a slave. So, with that being said, we are going to begin to learn the Constitution from way back in history. We're going to go through a quick summary, and then what we're going to do is get into the Constitution itself, into a few pertinent parts of the Constitution especially, that really kind of channel where our lawmakers should be, where the executive branch should be, and where the judicial branch should be at the federal level, and where the states and everybody else fits into that. So, without further ado, welcome everybody out there nationally. Welcome to you guys. Thank you again for coming out on a Friday night. The Constitutional Grassroots Movement has actually endorsed my campaign, which we're not going to talk about tonight. What we're going to talk about is the Constitution. But I'd like to thank those guys, because what they're doing is promoting exactly this. Our founding documents, our inalienable God-given rights, our birthright. So, without further ado, let's go. Knowledge versus information. The red pill, blue pill, the matrix. Has anybody not taken a red pill yet? How long ago did you take your first red pill? Years and years and years ago? Everybody's first red pill is hard to swallow. It is extremely hard to swallow, because it's the first time in your life, for the most part, that you're really looking at the system and going, man, what I was fed from the time I went into school until the time I got out of school, maybe into college, maybe into, present life, where you're watching mass media. Mass media, knowledge, versus information. Knowledge is different from information. We have a 24/7 news media out there that pumps us full of information, talking points that we go to battle with every day versus the other side, quote unquote. That other side is still our countrymen. And they're just talking points, because what they're not doing is presenting solutions. Solutions come from concrete fact, which is the Constitution and our history. You know, I think it was Patrick Henry, you know, he said, "I have no way to judge the future but by the past." In his famous speech, "Give me liberty or give me death." Knowledge is being able to take the facts of history and apply them to our current situation to present solutions. Not call each other names, not divide each other, because I'm telling you, where I came from in the military, division was one of the main tools we used to go in and conquer a country. It is used here against you. There are laws that have been passed recently in 2014 where propaganda is now legal to use at the United States government level, at the federal level, against its own citizens. It's unbelievable. What we have to do is see past it. We need to turn off the 24/7 hour, whatever side you're on, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, those are talking points. If you're not listening to people who are presenting solutions, and they're coming from a place of knowledge and love and history, you're probably listening to the wrong people. And that's what we hope to present to you guys tonight. Come in, please, come in. Hey, come on in. We're just getting through the opening here, so you're not missing too much. So, knowledge versus information. We are here to give you knowledge, not just information. Samuel Adams, one of my favorites. No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight without the help of foreign invaders. Good God. Does that ring true? Have we kind of fallen off? I mean, in our knowledge, what we just talked about, knowledge versus information. Our knowledge has become information, and information doesn't help us. And we've become an immoral people. We, you know, if we are good and we can interact through consent with each other, there's no need for government. So the larger your government is, it is basically an admission of your lack of morality. We are replacing our faith a lot of times with government to fill in and say, let's put our trust in our government instead of faith. What we should be doing is interacting through consent, always. And obviously that brings us to a very hot topic about guns in this country. You know, an armed society is a polite society, they say. Well, that's because it takes somebody in this room who might be a heck of a lot smaller than I am that I could bully all day long. But now, through natural and inalienable rights that we codified in the Second Amendment, now if I want to make a deal with you, I want to talk to you, I want something that you have, I have to come to you from a cerebral level. I have to talk to you as a person of my equal, because if I try to go any further than that, if I try to use force against somebody, at that point, she has the right to take my life. That makes us equal, all right? So an armed society is a civilized society, but manners, morality, that's what makes this country work. Laws don't keep anybody safe, because as soon as somebody wants to break a law, they break it. If laws kept people safe, we'd be one of the safest nations on earth, wouldn't we? We know that's not right. So Frederick Bastiat. Why do we have government in the first place? Frederick Bastiat wrote the law. Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws in the first place. It's like Jefferson said, you know, we create governments, governments are instituted among men. This is so true. Frederick Bastiat, if you haven't read the law, it's one of the foundations that you should go back and read. Governments exist because men get together And they say, listen, let's have a little bit of force to use to protect our property, our lives, and our family. That's it. You have the right to life, liberty, and property. And Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those who they oppose. Man, why don't we talk like this anymore? It's prescribed by us, our endurance. In America, we have conflated comfort with freedom. We are more comfortable than any time in history than any people on this earth have ever been. And yet we are licensed and permitted at every turn. We have the federal government in our mattress, in our shower heads, in our light bulbs, in the flooring, and the air conditioning. From the time you go to bed at night and wake up in the morning, complete your day, and return to that same federally approved mattress. It's incredible. And a lot of people will tell you that the Constitution is one of those documents that is a living, breathing document. It is not. It is a resolute document. It takes a lot to change the Constitution. It takes 2/3 of the Senate and the House together to come up with an amendment, or it takes an Article 5 Act of the states. Have we ever even had an Article 5 Act of the states? No. Never. That's how hard it is to change the Constitution. But you'll see how they've tried to do it and how they've done it and how we've gotten to the place we are tonight. But first, we got to do history. Just a little bit. I will try not to bore you guys in the back. I see you're already on your phones. We're going to try to do this in about 10 minutes. So
some of us take notes that way.
That's right. People who are in the 21st century, I love it. 700 years of history. Here we go. In the year 1100, the English people, back then the Anglo-Saxons, were thriving as a human culture. They were attracting so much attention at that point that other kingdoms were starting to look in on them. At that point, they said they went to this guy named King Ethelred, not quite king yet, Ethelred the Unready, King Ethelred in 1064, and they said, hey, look, we need a king to interact with these foreign nations, basically. And they said, you got one job, basically. War, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. All external objects. That's exactly what Madison wrote in Federalist 45. War, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce for our government. That's where this all begins, 1064. Way, 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 way back. All right? Now, 1100 comes around. King William and King Henry, brothers, William and Henry go off, and apparently they have a terrible, tragic accident out in the woods where William, who was the king at that time, gets shot in the face with an arrow and dies. Mysterious hunting accident. Don't worry about it, though, King Henry says now when he comes back as the king. He says to the folks, don't worry, we'll launch an investigation into ourselves. Right? You guys ever heard that sound familiar lately? Where the government investigates themselves and they never ever point the finger at anybody and everybody walks free? Like pretty much every time anybody sits in front of Congress? Yeah, kind of like this here. But we're going to throw you guys a bone. What King Henry does is he puts in writing the freedom of redress and the freedom of worship into the 1100 Charter of Liberties. This is the first time that we know of where this has happened. This is our first document that lends itself to our Constitution. Down here in 1215, the Magna Carta, this one is different. Why is the Magna Carta different from the Charter of Liberties? The Magna Carta is different from the Charter of Liberties because the Charter of Liberties was written and approved by the king. The Magna Carta was a list put together by the people, submitted to the king, and demanded and said, we will not comply anymore with your tyranny. usurpation of the 1100 Charter of Liberties. This is the first time that we know of where people rose up, put in writing a contract with their government and said, you can keep your throne, but some things are going to change around here. In the Magna Carta, we get our 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments, and they are written by the people. Security in your person, property, and effects from the 4th Amendment, due process, speedy public trial, the right to a jury in civil law, and guarding against cruel and unusual punishment. We move on. 1628, the Petition of Right. We start restricting taxes that the government can, that the king can take. The quartering of soldiers, the 3rd Amendment. And it restricts martial law use. So the king can't just say, hey, there's martial law, my guys are coming in, they've got free reign. That stuff doesn't fly anymore. In 1641, we get the Grand Remonstrance. The Grand Remonstrance is a long, long train of abuses. It's a list of redress. Who in here has read the Declaration of Independence all the way through? Who really, really knows it? I'll get into it in a second. Right here, 1648, the English Bill of Rights gave us the separation of power. Article 1, 2, and 3, dividing up our government between the different branches. Now, on to July 2nd, the Lee Resolution. The Lee Resolution is the day when we declared independence from a king, a tyrant, not a country. Once again, it was the British people. They weren't Americans yet. They were British people, and they said, listen, we're done with this. They brought it forth before a Continental Congress. They debated it on the floor. They voted on it, and it passed. A plan to ratify our independence from Great Britain at that point. It carried the full weight of law, and the Declaration was 2 days later, where they declared it to the world. The Declaration did something extremely special, and it sets the basis for how we operate as a country. This is extremely important. It establishes 13 equal states. What we know back then, or know today as countries, is what they called states, and I'll prove it to you here in just a second. It wasn't until 1787 and 1791 that we actually get the U.S. Constitution. It's a matter of 11 years where we even began. So we had 13 individual states before we ever had the U.S. Constitution. Obviously, the Articles of Confederation failed, and they were repealed, leaving just these governments. This is the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. What the Declaration of Independence was a long list of train of abuses, much like the Grand Remonstrance. It was, hey, you can't just drag our people off and try them in Quebec without the due process that we enjoy through English civil law. You can't just stamp everything and make us pay taxes without representation. The representation that we had during the colonial age was back over in the UK, and that's where taxation without representation came from. There is a long, long train of abuses, and it's really a breakup letter. It's one of the greatest breakup letters ever, where we said, enough of you, king. We're tired of you tyrants. We're going to do something else completely different. These men knew and were so well studied. They read books during the day, at night. They didn't have, obviously, the TV and the distractions. And so when they went in, and they had their lamps and everything else, they poured themselves into this type of knowledge and entertainment so that they could pass it down for generations. But let's read this real quick, because this is not only a huge statement, it is one of those that defines who we are, and it's also a prayer to the Magnificent and the Almighty. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in the General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are of right and ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that the free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do, and for the support of the Declaration, with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honors. God! If that doesn't just reach down, deep inside and stir something in you, you might want to check your pulse. This is amazing. This right here likens our states to the states of Great Britain, France, Spain, the superpowers of the world, each one of them redressing from a colony and coming back in as a state. They are now equal not only to each other, but to the great powers of the world. And these men at the bottom, pledging their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor to each other. And John Hancock, with the biggest brass of them all, and huge writing in the middle finger to the king, put his name right there. They knew as soon as they did this, as soon as they left that room, they had committed treason. They could be found and executed. You show me today the guy in Washington, D.C. that'll do this. I don't know that there's maybe but 4 of them up there, if that. This is extremely important. This state part, this is not a country yet. A united country. These are 13 individual states. There's no constitution, there are no articles of confederation. Do we live in a democracy?
No.
No. And you should correct everybody every time you hear it. Anytime anybody says, oh, in this democracy, shut them down. We live in a constitutional republic. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees Republican government to every state in this nation. That should be one of the things that you never, ever, 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 ever let go.
People don't understand the difference.
That's why we're here. That is why we're here. What is a democracy?
Majority rule.
Majority rule. 51% get to tell the other 49% how they want them to live on whatever issues out there. Democracy is not freedom. It's mob rule, and it's just a replacement for a tyrant. It's the same thing. All these people right now that are so agitated about the Second Amendment, they can't change it. The president can't change it. The Congress and the Senate with 2/3 could form an amendment. If it passed, that would change it. The states in an Article 5 convention, that could change it. But nothing outside of that. Not an executive order, not a court opinion, what they'll call a ruling, can't change the Second Amendment. Extremely important. This is what we're going to go into now with the Constitution. So we've established that the states were created first. They were created with the powers of war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. All those external things that we started talking about back in 1064 with King Ethelred. People create the states created the federal government. So here's an important piece. This is contract law. And in contract law, you have parties, you have the contract, and then you have the product. The product is inferior to the parties. Every time. Has to be. In nature, where do we derive our liberties from? The Almighty. Nature's God, right? This, we can't get together and be greater than God. It's impossible. We can't be greater than nature. It's a natural law. And when we ignore natural law like gravity, it has amazingly destructive consequences because it will catch up with you. That is where our Constitution gets its genius from. It is based in natural law because natural law over time is used like a tool for liberty for everybody. It doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter what sex you are. It doesn't matter how much melanin you have in your skin. It doesn't matter what God you worship. Natural law is natural law is natural law, and natural law is what created this nation. Cannot deny it for very long without disastrous consequences. All right, so let's get into parties and products. The oath of office, Article 6, Section 3. Everybody from the president down to your local sheriff and everybody in the military takes this oath right here in one form or another. And it is to uphold the Constitution. The senators and the representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive, so governors included, and the judicial officers, so judges are involved, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmations to support the Constitution, this Constitution. That's incredibly important. This is not partisan. This is not Republican. This is not Democrat. Washington warned us about parties. This is what we need to get back to. When I talked about that division earlier, this is not divisive. This is something that can bind us together. And under law, being bound to an oath is one of those things where there's when you break laws, there's consequences. Not honoring this oath, nonfeasance and malfeasance. What else happens when you're under oath in a courtroom and you lie? Perjury. So if your representatives at any level are taking this oath, which every single one of them do, and they don't honor this oath, they're committing perjury because they're lying to you and they know they're doing it. They're either complicit or they know they're doing it, and it doesn't matter one way or another, because when they go around this, when they go around the Constitution, they usurp the Constitution, it doesn't matter why they do it. What they're doing is infringing upon your rights. They are acting outside of the contract that has bound them. Oh, but how do we do it? How do we get to the point where we're at today? This is a big, big chunk of it. They'll talk about the supremacy, the commerce, the general welfare clauses, parties, investments, donors, bureaucracy and policy, and probably one of the worst and most misunderstood, judicial precedents. Can anybody find for me in the Constitution even the word precedents? You can't. Their oath is to the Constitution, not to precedents, not to bureaucracy, not to policy, not to their donors or investments or the party or any of the clauses. And I'll prove to you why it's not. Clauses aren't powers. There is a difference between a clause and a delegated authority, which is a power. Okay? All right. This, Article 6, is pretty important in our Constitution. This is the supremacy clause, and it has limits. Is anybody in here a English major, teaches English, anything like that? In law? No? You teach English? Yes?
Yes, I know something, yes.
Perfect.
Been recently back in touch with that, yes.
Oh, I love it. All right, so keep me honest here, okay?
Okay.
All right. This Constitution, comma, shall be the supreme law of the land. Full sentence? Subject, predicate, all that fun stuff. That sentence stands by itself. All right. This part is the crux of the whole thing. And the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the law of the land. Does this sound like we just said, here, federal government, you are all powerful. We'll be subjects again. We're gonna break away, we're gonna fight wars, and now we're gonna give all the power in the world through a supremacy clause to the federal government. That's ridiculous. On its face, it's absurd. It doesn't make any sense. However, people that teach constitutional law and the people that will try to undermine who we are as a nation will cite this clause all day long. They're wrong. All right, here we go. And all the treaties made, of which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. Now, you go back, so in this clause right here, in this fragment, and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof. Pursuance, pretty important word, isn't it? Pursuance of what? Pursuance of the Constitution. So if it's not made in pursuance thereof, the negative has to be true. If it's not made in pursuance of thereof, those laws, it cannot be the supreme law of the land because it is not in line with the Constitution. Does it make sense? And all treaties which have to be made in pursuance thereof. Those treaties also have to be in pursuance of the Constitution. Can states enter treaties? No, they can't. It's not, that is one power that they gave up. So the federal government, acting as a foreign emissary, war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, that's what they were made for. That's what these powers were delegated for. That's where it stops. That's where all of this stops. You guys ever seen that commercial where there's a couple of older ladies sitting around? She's got a wall full of her friends. She's talking about, hey, these are all my friends. And she says, I don't get it. She says, I don't like you. I unfriend you. And then she says, this is not how any of this works. That's what I think of all the time when I listen to our lawmakers. This is not how any of this works. And it's because they don't understand this. Or they usurp it. Sure.
I'm reading this. Now, this is a legal document, right?
It is.
And you talked about English majors. Does capitalization become a major point of this document?
Bingo. Our framers knew it too. The framers were so accurate in their language that right down to the letter inside of what we're doing here in the Constitution, the capital letters are proper nouns versus improper nouns. Proper nouns are different. I know this is a lot. Brains are exploding. Wires are going on. Filaments are lighting up. This is what is supposed to keep our government in line. This is not the tool for them to make us subjects to a crown, to an almighty, powerful government. Also, in the Constitution, this is a contract to bind down a federal government. This is not a contract that binds down the people. It gives them no delegated authority whatsoever to bind us as citizens down in this. Remember, we are supreme to the states, and the states are supreme to the federal government. All right? Any questions on this so far? Crystal clear?
I like how it was placed in the third line, under the authority of the United States.
Yeah.
It does not say under the authority of the United States of America.
The United States. Absolutely. All right. So, with the meeting of the minds in contract law, the meeting of the minds is a legal term. So if there's any ambiguity, if there's any question of what happened, what transpired, what was left out of this contract, we go back to the guys that wrote it, the representatives of the states that got together and passed the Constitution. Now, Federalist Paper 45, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, makes it pretty clear. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined, and those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Let's say extremely limited. Are they limited to whatever the Crown wants us to do? No. They are numerous and indefinite. Those are our reserved powers. The former will be exercised principally on external objects, war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, with which the last power of taxation will for the most part be connected. In Article 1, Section 2, that was how we were all supposed to be taxed. Not directly, but a portion among the states. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, your everyday life, concerns of the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, not even the states, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. This lays it out perfectly clear. This is the father of the Constitution who is telling us this is how it's supposed to work. This is how the federal government is supposed to work. This might be one of the most important Federalist Papers there is. And this paragraph right here might be one of the most important sections of that paper. Incredibly important. Oh, did it again, Banks. Let's see if I can fix it. I did this earlier.
You don't have it memorized?
I don't. Well, let's see if I can do it on here. I do apologize, guys.
When they read the document.
That's right. Let's try it one more time here. All right. Now, in, I believe it was 1792, an important piece of history was happening off the coast of the Northeast. The British were still coming in with their ships because they didn't recognize the fact that we were independent states yet, or an independent nation at that point. They were coming in, they were fishing our fish, and they were taking a lot of it, and a lot of the cod fishery fishermen were going broke. They were out of work. Now, what happened in the Northeast is a lot of people started saying, listen, we've got to start pulling from the public treasury, guys, because this is a national emergency, basically. We've got people whose lives are being ruined, and we've got to start subsidizing them. Well, James Madison said, hey, whoa. The fact that you're citing the General Welfare Clause is not what we intended at all. The General Welfare Clause was meant to apply to international. The same thing as treaties, war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. Everything was supposed to be foreign emissary oriented, not internal. And we weren't ever supposed to be subsidizing through the force of people coming into your home and extracting wealth from you, anything else internal. So let's read this. If Congress can employ money indefinitely to the general welfare and are the sole and supreme judges of the general welfare, they may take care of religion into their own hands. They may appoint teachers in every state, county, and parish and pay them out of the public treasury. They may take into their own hands the education of children, establishing in like manner schools throughout the Union. They may assume the provisions of the poor. They may undertake the regulation of roads and other post roads. In short, everything from the highest objects of the state legislation down to the most minute object of the police will be thrown under the power of Congress. It's a blueprint for what they've done. This is our birthright that we've missed, that we weren't told about on purpose, so that we misunderstood everything at the federal level so that they can grow and usurp their powers. Let's finish it off. Were the powers of Congress to be established in the latitude contended for, it would subvert the very foundations and transmute the very nature of the limited government established by the people of America. Holy cow. Do you feel like you got robbed? You feel like you got mugged at gunpoint? Kicked in the groin, maybe? Your dog got kicked on the way out the door? I do. This tells us right here. The General Welfare Clause is not a delegated authority. It's not a power. It is a clause that further describes what the delegated authorities are. That's it. Clauses aren't powers. They're just there to help us understand what the powers are there for. And that's war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. Into the Bill of Rights. Sorry. Don't let my rights stop you. They don't mean that much anyway, right? One of the sole points in this whole thing is if you don't know your rights, how can you ever expect to defend them the right way? How can you ever expect to stand up for them the right way? This, they codified, and there was a long debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So I hope you don't just read the Federalists and think, oh, this is everything. Read the Anti-Federalists as well. There were a lot of Federalists that didn't think we even needed a Bill of Rights because these weren't specifically set out, and they said, listen, if we don't name them, they can't mess with them. Yeah, right? You guys look depressed. This is knowledge. Absorb it as much as you can, because I expect when you leave that you are going to be the next people that starts to distribute this knowledge to your friends and to your family and to your family, to the people in your community. This is what has to happen. This is what's called force multiplication in the military. Learn it, understand it, take it out, and preach it. All right? Let's get into the Bill of Rights. My favorite amendment. We all know the other ones, right? I know you guys already know them cold, so we're going to skip to my favorite amendment. The 9th Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Holy cow. You have the right, can you guys name all the rights in the First Amendment? All 5 of them? Right? Assembly, speech, religion, press,
List of grievances.
list of grievances. Right? That's 5 in one amendment. We have the Second Amendment, you have a right to bear arms. The 3rd, obviously not quartering soldiers. 4th, right to be secure in your property and effects, which your current congressman in this district doesn't believe is a right to begin with, I don't know. 5th, due process. Big thing these days. Civil asset forfeiture. You guys know about that? Yeah?
About as unconstitutional as it gets.
Yeah. 6th, 7th, and 8th deal with speedy trials, matter of $20 going to court over in civil law, the right to not be persecuted and unfairly punished through torture. And then we get to the 9th Amendment. It says, even though we just listed all of those rights, all the other rights not listed cannot, shall. That is not permissive. That is, Congress will not construe these to deny you or disparage you other rights. Do you have the right to travel? Do you have the right to privacy? Heck yeah, you got the right to privacy. That means in your person, property, and effects, and in your electronic communications. What's FISA? Right? We'll just step around the 4 requirements for the 4th Amendment where a warrant shall issue. Just chalk it up to, we think there's something going on over there. Let's remove all the hoopla of really getting a warrant, swearing an oath of their affirmation, that if we do it unjustly, we're committing perjury in a court of law. Things like that matter. This secures all those other rights to you, individually, not as a group, individually. Your God-given natural rights. This secures it. I know I'm hammering this one. This is my favorite one. Because when anybody ever tells you there's not a right to this, hey, 9th Amendment, man. You don't get to tell me at the federal level what my rights are. My rights exist because I exist. Period. All right. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a state of emergency, does that still apply?
Depends on the state of emergency and martial law, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which one? There's currently
Let's-
a few ongoing.
Let's talk about that. Are we in a perpetual state of emergency in America? Yeah. They sign it all the day. They repatriate it all the time. It's ridiculous. Do your rights stop because of an emergency?
No.
No, they don't. Let's talk about it. Do your rights stop when there's an emergency at a school? Do you all have the right to run in with whatever firearm you might be carrying to help save some kids? Yeah, you do.
What about the signs?
May not be the most.
Great question. What about the signs? So good, I'm not going to answer it. State of emergency doesn't make your life any less valuable. Your life carries the same value to you before the emergency, during the emergency, and after the emergency. Period. All those things that they want to tell you about state of emergencies where your rights don't apply, not true. What about constitutional free zones? You guys don't know about constitutional free zones?
But
Within-
how can you swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and say you're in a Constitution-free zone?
Well, yeah, and
Contradiction.
yeah, and when I went overseas and I swore that oath to defend the Constitution, I didn't realize there were Constitution-free zones. Within 100 miles of all U.S. borders since 1952, I think, Constitution-free zones.
Usually between the ears.
Yeah.
That's one of those-
Constitutional free zones between the ears. So, understand the government is trying this every way, shape, and form. All of Florida is a constitutional free zone. All of Michigan is a constitutional free zone. Most of our coastlines where I think 2/3 plus of our citizens live, constitutional free zones. Under a state of emergency. Oh my gosh, drives me nuts. No such thing. All fabricated pixie dust, rainbows, and unicorn farts.
So are our rights unalienable?
No. Our rights never, ever, ever, ever stop because you exist. You exist, you have the right to your life, liberty, and property, and everything that goes along with it. Always. This is a catch-all. They didn't throw this into the Constitution because they thought that, let's put it in there. They threw this in there as a catch-all. Right along with the 10th Amendment, which everybody, oh, he's a 10th Amendment guy, oh, he's a states' right guy, he must be for slavery. Give me a break. The Constitution, if you know your history, was a document put together by a bunch of guys. Most of them were not slave owners. 1% of the population back then owned slaves. And guess what? People who had skin that was colorful, they were slave owners too. And guess what? People who had white skin, the Irish, the Scottish, a bunch of the Scandinavians, I don't know, Persians, everything else. Everybody's relatives at one point or another have been slaves. I hate to break that to some of those people out there in some communities, but everybody in history whose ancestors have been, for the most part, their ancestors have been slaves. And so when we talk about racism, which I don't believe exists in the first place, because we're all part of the human race, right? Doesn't matter what color melanin you have in your skin, or what gender you are, or who you love, or even what God you worship. That's what this was all about. This was about expanding liberty through a document that codified natural law. So the 10th Amendment, right here. Well, my second favorite. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. There's two catch-alls at the end of the first bill, at the end of the Bill of Rights, as originally written. That means that all power is not specifically delegated to the federal government for the war, peace, negotiation, foreign commerce, and post office. Belong to the states. When is the last time we had a governor or a secretary of state or an attorney general from the state of Georgia stand up to the federal government and say, you keep that money. We're going to do what Georgia wants to do because we reserve the powers as a sovereign state. There's nothing racist about that. There's nothing sexist about that. There's nothing homophobic about that. In this day and age, the federal government takes in $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion. They spend $4.5 trillion. But for the sake of argument, let's just do the math. You got 435 members in the Senate and the House. So 3.5 trillion divided by 435. I'm sorry.
535.
I'm sorry, 535. Thank you very much for keeping me honest. 535. That's about $9 billion a piece. I'm just a dumb, knuckle-dragging, crane-eating Marine. But $9 billion? We're talking about some of the wealthiest people in America. Life fortune. Tell them to go spend it responsibly in 1 year. Now, go take those clowns, usurping tyrants up there in D.C., and tell them year after year after year, you are responsible for spending $9 billion responsibly. I don't know about your mental horsepower, but spending $9 billion responsibly is impossible. It's an impossibility. Can't do it. That should really wake everybody up. That's why they wrote this. That's why they wrote the 10th Amendment. Because they knew at that level, that amount of money and resources, they couldn't spend it responsibly. There was going to be bureaucracy. There was going to be waste. That horsepower is left to the states, to those guys to figure out the problems. It's called creative destruction. They thought, hey, we've got 13 different colonies. We've got 13 different ways to use our mental horsepower as states to solve problems and best practices. So we can sit there and we can pull what's good from one state and their practices and leave what's bad. That creative destruction is what made us the greatest nation on earth. It's what made us exceptional. This is all important. And when you're looking for candidates to run your state, this better be on their top agenda. And we're going to get into how we start pushing back here in a second. I know I've given you guys a lot of information. I know some of it you're just going, oh my God, I'm seething because the government is so far out of whack. There's hope, okay? States across this nation are already starting to do this. Juries across this nation are starting to push back. People are starting to push back. It just takes a backbone. It's called nullification. This is Alexander Hamilton. There is no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of a delegated authority contrary to the tenor of its commission under which it is exercised is void. So no legislative act, therefore contrary to the Constitution, can be valid. That's a hell of a statement. Excuse my language. To deny this would be to affirm that the deputy is greater than his principal and that the servant is above his master, that the representatives of the people are superior to the people themselves, and that men acting by virtue of powers may do not only what their powers do not authorize, but what they forbid. Another one of our framers who helped write the Constitution. He lays it out for us. Anything outside our delegated authorities, basically Article 1, Section 8, and a little bit of the other parts, they're void. They are absolutely void. Back to this. Now we can start talking about this. We've looked at the General Welfare Clause in the Cod Fishery Papers. Madison told us, these are not powers. This is just a clause. You don't just get to do whatever you want. Supremacy Clause would prove to you in its own wording that it doesn't make a supreme federal government. It makes a federal government supreme in only its delegated authorities. That's it. Parties would like to tell you that they're supreme and that their way or the highway, right? Because of the duopoly system that we have here in the United States. George Washington couldn't stand these parties. Yeah, because you'll get your short-term fix, you'll get your short-term legislation and those means, but in the long term, they're going to overrun your rights. Donors, investments, all of those things we all already know corrupt. Bureaucracy and policy. Bureaucracy and policy, is that elected representation? Nope. Is there anything that defines bureaucracy and policy? No, not in the Constitution. Judicial precedents. This one we need to sit on and talk about for a second. How many times have you guys heard in the mass media that courts rule? The Supreme Court issued a ruling today. Guess what? Supreme Court doesn't rule. No court rules in America. We're not an oligarchy. We are a constitutional republic. If the Supreme Court ruled, and they're saying is final across the board, that's exactly what we would be. We would be an oligarchy. They are 1/3 of the government. How many of you guys have also heard that we have 3 equal branches of government?
Well, 3 equal branches of the state. Government is a little bit more inclusive.
Of the federal government. Do we have 3 equal branches of the federal government? By design? Absolutely not. First is the Congress. It has more power on purpose because it is made of the people and of the states by the senators before we had the 17th Amendment. That's important. They were given the most power because it was closest to us, the people, the citizens. The executive was next, who was denied the power of war because they knew the executive was always prone to get us into trouble with other nations. There's a reason the crest of the United States were the eagle clutching 13 olive branches and 13 arrows in a shield on his chest with wings spread. why his head faces right, towards the olive branches. It's because they wanted us to be peaceful people. And that's why we have the First Amendment. First and not second. They treasured peace. They knew that a nation could not be prosperous when its sons and daughters were employed in war. We've lost sight of that, haven't we? We have been at war for the past 17 years. War without a declaration. We haven't declared war since World War II. Thirdly, the judiciary. The judiciary was something people like Thomas Jefferson were absolutely scared to death of. He called them sappers and miners that would undermine our very foundation, chipping away in the middle of the night. They were made third for a reason. He didn't trust them. They didn't trust them. They knew that they would do everything in their power to gain power and rule as they are supposed to do now, which just wasn't right. That makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? A court's jurisdiction is in the people in the courtroom. There's no judicial review. There's nothing like that. Reading between the lines of applied powers with John Marshall and Joseph's story. You really want to understand from the judiciary side how this was all put together? Go read George St. Tucker. George St. Tucker was the first justice that actually sat through the Constitutional Convention. You start reading his treatises that came from Blackstone, and that guy told the story of how to define a republic and how the judiciary was supposed to work, how the government was supposed to work. And then we got into Marshall and story and all this nonsense where we start to transmute and we start to push authority and usurp the Constitution through judicial review. Are they supposed to just be able to grab cases and hand pick their cases? Absolutely not. Do they rule? No. They issue opinions. Which brings us to the fourth branch of government. Who is it? It's the states. The states and the people. When we get to the states and the people, when we understand that we are the final check and balance, that if something doesn't smell right, if something is outside the constitutional purview of the Constitution at the federal level and they start doing it, we have not only the ability, but we have the responsibility. They said interpose. We have the responsibility as a people to stand up and say, no way, federal government, not in this state. In Article 1, Section 2, how I mentioned taxation through apportionment, that was a form of redress that they gave to the states on purpose so that when they got outside of their boundary, we just cut them off financially. We said, we don't like what you're doing up there. That's outside of the constitutional delegated authorities. We're going to keep that money here at home because you're not going to spend it on those things. Makes a lot more sense, doesn't it, than a 16th Amendment where they think that they can just gather taxes directly from everybody without redress. How tired would you get every week if a guy from the government came by your house and said, you owe me $1,000 or whatever your progressive tax scale was? What are you going to spend it on, man? You're going to spend it on quails on cocaine to see if they're more sexually promiscuous? It's a thing that our government spends money on. No, I'm pretty sure after a couple weeks of doing that, you and your buddies are going to get together with your Second Amendment and your right to protect yourself, your property, and your affairs. And you're going to tell that guy to bug off. That is the nature of where we're at today. Start thinking about it in these terms. Challenge other people to think about it in these terms. If the judiciary is so powerful in what they claim today, they wouldn't have put them third. They would have put them first. What they say has no bearing if it's outside the Constitution, just like it says in Article 6, Section 2. It's time we start looking at leaders who understand this. This is the litmus test. Here we go. Nullification. This is where we are in power. What is nullification? Yeah, it just means, hey, look, no. No, just say no. I came from the just say no generation, so it's easy for me, right? No, just say no. They didn't say just say no to government. However, it's well applied here. Nullification comes in a lot of different forms. A lot of people will call you crazy for nullification. It's like conspiracy and the CIA, coining that term for crazies, right? Well, let's get on our tinfoil hats and let's go. James Madison in nullification. The states, then being the parties to the Constitutional Compact and in their sovereign capacity, it follows of necessity that there can be no tribunal above their authority to decide in the last resort whether the compact made by them be violated, and consequently that as the parties to it, they must themselves decide in the last resort such questions as may be of sufficient magnitude to require their interposition. Nullification. For them to step in and say, get back in your lane, federal government, it's left to the states to decide this. Thomas Jefferson said that the several states who form that instrument, being sovereign and independent, have the unquestionable right to judge of its infraction, and that a nullification by those sovereignties to all the authorized, unauthorized acts done under the color of that instrument is the rightful remedy. He went on to say that every state has a natural right in the cases not within the compact to nullify of their own authority all assumptions of the power by the others within their limits. Without this right, it would be under the domain, absolute and unlimited, of whosoever might exercise the right of judgment for them. It's basically saying we are not subjects, we are not colonies, we are countries, we are states, and we are sovereign.
So I had a question.
Sure.
So is secession then an ultimate form of nullification?
It is. Where in here does it say that the parties to the contract can't leave the contract?
There you go.
Now, in contract law, there's also this thing where if states aren't abiding by the contract, they get kicked out of the contract. There's a reason they don't teach us this in school.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, so that's what's happening, exactly.
Does California want to leave the nation? Do they want to split it into different states? Absolutely. Do they have the right to do so? Yeah, they do. They are a party to a contract. The equal footing doctrine, the equal footing, when they decide as a people they want to be a state within the United States, when they come in of their own free volition, very, very important, they come in by their own free volition. What does that mean? Oh, here, guys, we're here. You can have whatever you want. It's now yours. The rest of you, right? No, it's not. It's still theirs. They give up a few delegated authorities. That's it. So if they come in by their own free volition, can they leave by their own free volition? You're absolutely right, they can. Do I want to see it happen? No. In the first 5 papers, the Federalist Papers, John Jay and Madison talk about this. There are a host of reasons why we are better together. We are. When we are unified. When we live our lives and we let others live in peace. But do they have the rights to leave? Yeah, they have the rights to leave. We have the rights to leave. The question is, do we want to? Jury nullification. Oh, they actually used to tell juries that you have the right of jury nullification. Do they teach this anymore? No, they don't. There are court cases where they said now that jury nullification is a non-starter, basically. Yeah, they've tried to tell you that, and lawyers will tell you all day long the jury nullification is one of those things that can't happen anymore. All right. You got a question?
What's the point of the jury?
States not have the right to leave the union when they left?
Say again?
Did the southern states have the right to leave the union when they left?
They absolutely did. Yes. Am I pro-slavery? No.
I want to know if they have it.
I am pro-individual freedom all the time. Did they have the right? They did. Was there a whole lot going on that we're not going to get into in this discussion about the Civil War? Yeah, there is. So that's another class, another time, but yeah. All right. So jury nullification. Yeah, sure, Jeff.
The parts that you're going over right now, where are they?
Are what?
Are they in the Constitution?
What do you mean, are they in the Constitution?
Well, this is nullification. You're not talking about an article.
Well, yeah, so what we're talking about is the meeting of the minds part. The meeting of the minds is the legal term. It's used in contract law when people come together and they create a product, which is the Constitution, which created a federal government. The contract is the Constitution. So if there's any ambiguity on what the contract is and how it's supposed to be implemented, we go back to the people that wrote it. That's where this comes from. That's why we're citing James Madison, John Jefferson, Madison, John Jay, and all those guys.
You're citing their notes.
We're citing their writings. And they wrote reams and reams and reams. They were some of the most prolific writers on the planet. And they left us those writings so that we could determine what they meant in the Constitution in forming this government. That's why we cite them, because it is a legal term called the meeting of the minds. So in jury nullification, Thomas Jefferson, I consider the trial by jury as the only anchor yet ever imagined by man by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution. Jefferson! He's telling you that the jury has the right to not only judge of a law's infraction, but of the law itself.
That
So when
was way back in English common law.
Exactly right. If we didn't need a jury of our peers, if we were never given a jury of our peers, we just had judges. Does that make any sense? Can a judge just sit there and tell us everything? Can he demand of a jury? No, he can't. That jury of your peers has the right not only to judge of the infraction of the law, but of the law itself. John Adams, it would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. It's John Adams. Mr. Spooner, if a jury had not the right to judge between the government and those who disobey its laws, the government is absolute, and the people, legally speaking, are slaves. And that made, I messed this up earlier, that made the trial by jury the polity of their liberties.
That's the county trial by jury. Excellent.
We have a jury for a reason. And it's not just that it convicts you or sets you free. It is to judge the laws themselves so that when we are under absolute tyranny and usurpation, that they can come back and tell the rest of everybody else out there that this law is unjust. Extremely important in this republic. Now, this is from the 10th Amendment Center. If you guys don't know the 10th Amendment Center, I would definitely get acquainted with them. This is just a short list of how different states are pushing back. Arizona's votes to block any new federal gun control. Do they have that within their power? They absolutely have it in their power. Permission is not required. Alabama passes constitutional carry. Is it in their power? Absolutely. Get the government out of marriage in Alabama, 9-0. Is marriage ever to be defined outside of a religion? Nope. Are governments supposed to pick winners and losers based on who you get married to? No. Do they use a tax code as a weapon now for social engineering? They sure do. Not a delegated authority of the federal government. Pennsylvania, the 24th state, this is old, you can see, that legalizes medical cannabis and nullifies federal prohibition. We didn't ever give the authority of agriculture, not in interstate commerce, not in any form of what we grow, what we ingest. If you guys reserve all those rights per the 9th Amendment, do you have the freedom to eat what you want? Do you have the freedom to abuse anything that you want. Alcohol, coffee, cheeseburgers, driving. Yeah. You have freedom. What sets us apart? Morality. What does your faith, what is that inner flame that keeps you centered, what does it tell you? What's good and bad? Morality is what keeps a nation functioning, not laws.
So,
Sure.
the federal government, nuts as it is, if you start doing this 10th Amendment stuff, which states are doing, do they consider the states an insurrection and bring in federal troops to stop them?
Depends on who's in Congress. Article 1, Section 7 gave us, in Congress, the power of the purse. It gave it to the House of Representatives. During the last administration, they defunded a whole lot of what the DEA was doing inside of the United States. And therefore, people like Colorado were first to step out and say, listen, we're done. We are absolutely done with your federal prohibition of cannabis. Is that their right to do so as a state? Yeah. Is it also the right of a state to determine how they want to provide health care to their people? Yes, it is. That means that if Massachusetts, New York, California, they want to go a single payer route, they have the right to do it. And if we here in Georgia, Tennessee, Nebraska, wherever, if we determine that the free market is the best solution for our people, we have the right to disregard health care from the federal government. It is not a power delegated to them. This is one of my favorites. This is also happening in Texas. The House passes the supporting gold, silver as currency. Basically saying, listen, right now with the Federal Reserve the way it is, we're $20 trillion in debt and climbing like a rocket. We've got 200 plus trillion in unfunded liability. The fairy tale doesn't go on forever. We're writing checks now for our kids and putting them in debt. Is it going to fail? Yeah. Idaho, places like, I want to say, North Dakota, Texas, North Carolina, Louisiana, Arizona, Nebraska, all of these places are sitting there going, whoa, 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 whoa. Man, this train is going up to a bend right now. It's going way too fast. We're going to start hedging against it. Do these states have that right? Yeah. Should there be competitive currencies out there? Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, blockchain? Who's to say no at the federal level? Do they have the power to coin money? They do. Do they have the power to go out and just print money out of thin air? There's one great meme out there that says, hey man, you guys see these, this currency that's floating around out there? I hear there's an unlimited supply and it's backed up by nothing.
Bitcoin?
No, it's the US dollar.
All the US dollar.
The Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is nothing, it's not federal. There is nothing reserve about it. It creates debt dollars out of thin air. We trade them like there's something backing them up. They used to, before Bretton Woods and unpegging from the gold standard, actually be a note that you could go to a repository and get a piece of silver or gold out of. So, no.
Is it backed up by the good faith of the people?
Yeah.
So, does immigration apply to this?
Naturalization. Immigration and naturalization, not the same thing. Different discussion, but not the same thing.
So California can't say we're going to let in here if we want to let in?
No. And why do they do that? They give us the power of uniform naturalization in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the Constitution. Okay? Not immigration.
What's
Naturalization.
For those who,
What's that?
what's the difference?
Immigration is moving from one place to another, right? Can they control the people inside the countries of the United States? Nope. However, they put in naturalization for a reason, because people who wanted to come here and assimilate needed a uniform way to do that. And that was so that they kept federal agents out of their states. Remember, those guys didn't like anything about a federal government being all powerful. They wanted it small and confined, and they want those federal agents to stay as far away from their states as possible. Secondly, they did that because they didn't want they don't want a particular state to have a whole bunch of people come in. And the state just says, oh, all right, they're part of our voting block now. What does that do in Congress? Skews the numbers, doesn't it? One state could just say, all right, come on in, everybody. We're going to overpower the rest of the states through our votes. That's what, these guys were smart. They protected us against the right things. Did they, in terms of immigration? No. In the executives of our states, the governors who allow these sanctuary cities to go on, all the other governors should be saying something to the effect of, hey, you're outside of the contract, you're not obeying the contract, you're letting people who come in from outside the country vote in your elections, therefore swelling your numbers and misrepresenting the rest of us, or disproportionately getting outside of your zone. You can start kicking people out for those kind of things. Or you can put pressure on them through trade and everything else with their services, their products, interstate commerce. Those things should be applied by the executive. The fact that we don't have executives from our state screaming at places like California, New York, and everybody else for violating that contract, that's a problem. That's that backbone we're talking about, the litmus test, understanding the Constitution and the power it gives to the states in the contract. Civil asset forfeiture, we've already talked about that. There are people all over the United States, tons of states are taking this into consideration right now, thinking about getting rid of civil asset forfeiture. Some states have already done it. Maine, I think New Hampshire, and a few others. The federal militarization of police. We talked about that earlier. Is the federal government supposed to be arming our police at the local? No, they're not. Nullification in courts. This would require courts to inform the juries of the right to nullify the laws in New Hampshire. And the stingrays down here being, once again, securing your personal property effects. Stingrays are used by law enforcement to get into your phone to see whatever you've got. Whether it's documents, call records, text,
Wait a minute,
you name it.
that might be the only time they read the Constitution.
Very true. Very, very, very true. But this is what we're seeing. It can be done. It's happening. We see it across the board. We see states doing it. We see people fed up. We see them pushing back as the fourth check and balance, the fourth arm of government saying, enough is enough. You've got to leave us alone to live our lives. What they said in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson put it to the some effect of, their officers are coming here and infesting us, eating out our substance. That is exactly what they've done. They've come in to our states, into our communities. They've demanded things through bureaucracy and policy of unelected officials, and these guys are brave enough to push back. Can you imagine? You get 2/3 of the states plus people with executive backgrounds, with a spine, and a populace that understands their rights, their God-given birthrights as Americans, to nullify not only the federal government, but the government at our level. If it is out of their purview, it shouldn't exist. And we should be able to stand up and start citing these types of things to say, this is exactly why it shouldn't exist. That's why I do this. So that I can empower every one of you. So that you can empower another crowd. Get out and use it. Start talking about it. Start learning it in a depth. And if you go to the 10th Amendment Center, there's a fantastic teacher. Her name is Chris Ann Hall. She is one that imparted a whole lot of this knowledge into me. That gave me the foundation to where I could go out and start testing other things. And throwing it up against this. I guarantee you, I have not found an argument yet that beats the original framers' intent and their writings. I've yet to see it. And I want people to challenge it. That's how we get stronger. That's how we start to understand who we are as a people. After this, you guys should be going out. You should be creating groups. You should be talking. You should be trying to get other people to come in and start listening to this message. And we will make it, we're putting it out on the internet. This is being recorded and streamed live to the United States right now. To anybody on Facebook, on Twitter. I want to see this happen all over this nation. Yeah, am I running for U.S. Congress? I am. but we have a much broader mission, and that is to create more people who understand this. They can go to that level, to go to the state level, they can go to your local level, and start pushing back. Because, like I said earlier, we owe it to these kids. We owe it to avoid war at all costs. We owe it to them to find a peaceful solution. Well, peace is a chance. When I look at this nation, I don't see it as divided as they tell us it is. I see things that happen like the travesties down in Parkland that bring people together. I see things like Texas, where we had a hurricane this summer, last year, even Georgia. I see things like what we call Snowmageddon here in Atlanta, where people were putting up Facebook sites without the government's help and saying, there's somebody stranded here that needs a place to go, that has a baby, that needs a hot cup of coffee, or needs just a place to wait it out for a few hours. Complete strangers going out to stranded motorists and bringing them in. That's who we are. It should tug at your heartstrings a little bit. We're not monsters. We're just people. We all have flaws. We're not perfect. But if we can live our life without using force and initiating force against each other for whatever reason, we don't hurt anybody else. And you know, I tell my kids all the time, we don't hurt people, we don't take their stuff. Pretty simple to live by. It's kind of like a golden rule, right? If my 4-year-old, 3-year-old, and 6-year-old can understand that, I guarantee you, those guys up in DC, women alike, should all understand that. Anybody feel like a constitutional expert yet? Do you feel like you may have gained a little bit of understanding and a little bit of empowerment? A little bit? I hope it's a lot. I hope you leave here tonight with a burning sensation in your heart to go out and share this with people. They say, make America great again. We can do it, but we've got to make it constitutional again. We live within our means of the Constitution and our delegated authorities at the federal level. Return the powers to the people in the states. Let individuals live their lives and respect life. We will change as a nation. We will avoid the pitfalls of a civil war and breaking up. And we will thrive once again, because we've seen over and over and over again where people are left to each other to interact without coercion, without force, without bureaucracy. The human condition thrives. Our founder said that I would rather live in dangerous freedom than in comfortable servitude. I think that's how we would all like to live. I think that's what America is all about. I believe that's what our birthright is, and I believe that is what God intended for each of us through nature's law. So, with that, please go out and spread the message of peace, liberty, and justice the way that our framers knew it to everybody else. So, now, what we're going to do, that really concludes the presentation. We're going to take questions, because I'm sure some of you have them. If you need to leave, feel free. I mean, I know this can get long. I know you guys got some kids back there. You're not going to disturb anything if you need to get out of here. But for those who want to stay and ask questions, what we're going to do is we're going to take a question from the audience. And then what we're going to do, because we are streaming nationally, is we're going to take a question from somebody out there on the internet. So, this is your chance if you need to get out, and by all means.
We pause for a moment and express our feelings about the presentation.
Thank you. I'm humbled. Thank you very much. So, questions from the audience? Anybody? You got one already, Bank?
And can you say that you're taking questions from online too?
Yeah.
They need to know they can ask questions.
Yeah, hey, you guys out there on the Twitterverse and Facebook and everywhere else, Feel free to ask questions. Banks, meme lord, keeper of birthdays, and now keeper of internet questions, will ask those questions. So, by all means, floor is open, guys.
Well, you may have heard a question along these
Sure.
lines. The 14th Amendment, U.S. citizen. By definition, the U.S. citizen is subject to the jurisdiction. According to the Parties and Products opening statement and principles there, the people created the stage which created the federal government. So if something itself, like a U.S. citizen, is subject to the federal government, then the U.S. citizen cannot be one of the people, because the people, you can't be subject to something which you're the master of.
Right. The question was about the 14th Amendment. Are we citizens? And are citizens legally bound to whatever the United States government says? Well, nature's law applies here. Nature's law is you are an individual. You belong to yourself. You own yourself. You own your life. You own the products of your time. Government can't take that away. As Frederick Bastiat said in the very beginning there, governments are created by men to protect our rights. That's it. If anybody wants to sit there and say government is here to keep you safe, look down at Parkland. Down at Parkland this week, how many levels of government did we have fail? All of them, right? From the federal all the way down to your sheriff, the local police, the school, every level of government failed. Government is not here to keep you safe. Government is instituted among men to protect your inalienable rights. Period. End of story. So when anybody tells you, oh, it's for your own good, well, heck, yeah, we've got policy, we've got regulation, we've got laws on the books now that are to keep you safe from your own inalienable rights. It doesn't make any sense, does it? How can you have laws to keep you safe from your inalienable rights? It doesn't make any sense. The only thing government was ever meant to do was protect us. Hope that answers your question. Yeah. From online, thanks.
I've got Aaron asking if you're going to post this online later.
Yes. Short answer. Yes, we'll post this online later.
So, in order to have a free society, the people have to be educated as to what the Constitution is, and we have to take personal responsibility as well. So if we don't have those two things, then we're going to be enslaved by a run-amok federal government.
It has happened throughout history. We have seen it not only in our own history within British civil law or UK civil law. We're seeing it again now. We are seeing that the natural law, the Constitution, is being overrun, it's being ignored, it's being usurped. And like I said earlier, you cannot ignore natural law like gravity without dire consequences at some point. What we need to do is shift, right? This is what it's all about. We still have the right to assemble, we have the right to association with each other, we have the right to educate each other. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take responsibility on our part. It's going to take action on our part. You have to do something. You have to step up. Go ahead.
We have to keep the internet free in order to maintain those lines of communication.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, softball, here we go. Net neutrality. Is there a problem with the internet? Does anybody have a problem getting whatever information they want from the internet right now? No. Well, unless it's a FISA request, right? However, outside of that, there's not a problem with the internet. There's not. And whenever government touches anything outside of the purview of the Constitution, what happens? They not only destroy it, they make it wholly inadequate and then more expensive. I don't want to see that with my government. I don't want to see it with their health care. I don't want to see it with their money supply. I don't want to see it across the board. You look at TVs, you look at projectors, your phone. If the government was in charge of any of those things, do you think you'd have an iPhone in your pocket or a Droid? No. You'd still be sitting down in an IBM that filled up a living room, that had about 3 megabytes of memory and no connection to anything else, and I don't know, you're probably playing Oregon Trail and somebody like Banks would get cholera and die on the trail. I mean, that's really what it is. Sorry, Banks, but that's the reality. You got another question from online?
No, I can make one up if you want.
Sure, go for it.
You're talking about action. What kind of specific action can some people take maybe if they wanted to do some really cool things for liberty?
What is your gift? Banks asked, what can you do to promote the message of liberty and peace and the Constitution and justice? What is your gift? What is God pushing you to do? For me, he said, Shane, hey man, wake up again. After I joined the Marine Corps and did all that stuff and went back to studying, I got to the point where I felt this weight on my shoulders. And he was pushing me. Years and years ago, I started studying because I wanted to know what was wrong with our government, where we were supposed to be. And what I found was an education that I believe he put before me for a reason. And as time unfolds and we begin to understand further, when we look at things from a 50,000-foot level instead of right here, our everyday lives, we start to see a much broader, bigger plan. That is what led me to step out. Was I scared to death? Yeah, I was scared to death. I had to pray multiple times for signs, for encouragement, for whatever. But God gave me a gift. He gave me a gift where I can stand in front of people and talk. And I can talk about what I know. And I can make friends. And it's just easy for me. This is something I extremely enjoy. This terrifies a lot of people. This is kryptonite for a lot of really, really great people, including the meme lord. What can you do? What is your gift? What has God put into your life that you can take out there and throw into society and make a positive difference? Come from a place of love. Can you make signs? Can you volunteer your time? Can you do posts online? Are you really good with things like memes? Are you great with organizing? Are you good with fundraising? Get involved in your community. Go to a party meeting. It doesn't matter which one, but be the person in the room that starts looking at solutions instead of division. Bring people together. Come from a place of love, and I guarantee you the results will be resounding. Sure.
So you're saying people should volunteer for a campaign. Good. I've got two more questions here. Even though a state may nullify a federal law, if the federal government cracks down on that person for breaking a law, and that state doesn't step in to protect the person or business, what good is nullification or regress is there to defend the person?
Great question. There's an example that happened up in Kansas here just recently. Within the last year, a couple of guys, after they passed some abolition of federal gun laws, got together. One guy bought a suppressor from another, I believe. They did it through the internet. They made it public so that they knew what was going on. There was nothing nefarious. There was no collusion. There was no malcontent. They got together. They had a transaction without the government. And then the federal government came in and it overrode the state government. And the state legislatures, the governor, the attorney general of that state in Kansas betrayed those people. They entrapped those people because they said, guess what? We are going to almost unanimously pass this federal ban on all federal gun laws. And we're going to put teeth in it so when federal agents do come knocking at your door to arrest you, if they come to your door, we'll arrest them and put them in prison.
What do you do? Call the sheriff's department?
They absolutely should call the sheriff's department. In their case, what happened was every one of those people who voted for that law at the state level failed to stand up and exercise a backbone to protect their citizens. It's unbelievable. Can you do something about it? You bet you can do something about it. You can fight it all the way. There are people who are volunteering for those cases. It's in the appeal process now. And that, what we need to understand is from a jury level, the infraction of that law. Is the law itself, the charge they're being charged with, is at law of a valid law? So with that, Yeah, those people in the jury should be deciding that. Go ahead.
That's a great example of why people just don't want to do it. I mean, yeah, he might be right, but he's got to get somebody to fight him or somebody to go to court.
But what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Should we just kneel down? Should we be comfortable within our chains? That's not what we're called to do. You have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, please say it. No.
No. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you're going to say that a lot if we send you to Washington, because that's going to be your job.
Yeah. One of my heroes actually has the nickname Dr. No.
Yes.
His name was Rand Paul.
Yes.
Okay. That guy, he stood up there. He was a nice guy. He was well spoken, but he was a champion of liberty. And if it wasn't a power delegated by the Constitution, he didn't vote for it.
Okay.
Dr. Paul, why do you never, ever, ever vote yes? Because I actually read the bills was his answer.
I remember that.
Well,
he did. He was the one lone vote.
No.
No.
I actually remember that.
Go ahead, Banks.
We've got two questions that are kind of the same. I'm going to mold them into one from Ryan and Joey. Joey says, how do we overcome apathy and break the addiction to consumerism? And Ryan says, what's the number one thing we can do to head back towards liberty?
All right.
Kind of two questions, actually.
Yeah. So let's address the first one. How do we break apathy? Same thing I said earlier. Do something. Take action. I'm talking to every person who can hear this message. Do something. Take action. Get involved with somebody, some campaign. I don't care if it's clear across the country. Do something. Don't do nothing. They win when you are inactive. So get in, do something. It's all it takes. The smallest thing. I can tell you when I have people show up to go help me knock on doors, that means something to me. The people that continue to come back and our numbers grow and grow, guess what? They're taking messages of liberty to those people in this district. And it provides us a platform to where sometimes we get some funds out of that. Funds help me get this message further out and further out and further into not only the United States, but around the world. And now that we're all connected through the internet, we can have a difference just like that. Somebody right now might be streaming this on the other side of the world. It's incredible. We have more power at our fingertips these days to spread this message than we ever have in our life. Learn it, get involved, and take action. That's all it takes. The second question was
the number one thing.
Number one thing in
to head back towards liberty.
To head back towards liberty, education. If you don't know your history, if you don't know the lamp of experience, you'll never be able to guide your way. You have to know it. You have to be able to espouse the principles that make America unique, that make it the shining light on the hill. If you don't do that, if you don't understand it, you can't tell other people. And you can't protect your own rights, and you can't put the government back into its little box where it's supposed to be in the first place. You have to take the time. You have to get smart in the principles of liberty. Okay? Any other questions in the audience? Yes, ma'am.
When is your next class?
When's my next class? Boy, I don't know. But here's the thing is, my next class is...
The 10th? 10th of March?
No.
I don't think we have one scheduled yet.
It'll be in
However,
County. It'll probably be in April.
Yeah, when there's a group that wants us to come talk about this, I am happy to do it. We just have to get with Banks over here, put it in our extremely busy schedule, and we'll do it again. This is what we are doing. This is the mission, to empower you so you can empower more people, so that people learn that knowledge so we can get back to liberty. Answer your question? Thank you for it.
Hey,
Great question.
About
Yes,
the
sir.
Sheriff's Department, and I
Sure.
mentioned that before. A couple of years back, I had the DNR on a piece of property, and the wording you have to use when you call the Sheriff's Department is they're called intruders. The Sheriff's Department will be right there. Call them the intruders. DNR, Army Corps of Engineers, because they go on your property and they try to steal stuff. They do. I caught them a few times. So I called the Sheriff's Department and they kicked them off the property.
And that's what your sheriff is there for.
That's what he's there for.
Your sheriff is one of the most powerful people in your local community. He might, actually, he's the most powerful. He is elected to uphold the Constitution, which is your inalienable rights.
And most of them do it.
Yeah, and the sheriff, because he's elected by you and probably wants to be re-elected by you, and you can reach out and touch him and tell everybody about your stories and interaction with his office, I guarantee you the response you get from your sheriff is going to be probably one of the better ones out there. Now, if your sheriff, if your sheriff is not going, you know, he's more of a Broward County sheriff where there's no accountability, no responsibility, hey, you're going to need a new sheriff. But here's the thing: is with the sheriff, that guy has the power to repel foreign invasion from the federal government. All he has to understand, and there's case after case after case with this. There is a farmer, I believe, in the Midwest somewhere, where people were doing the absolute unthinkable and drinking raw milk. I know, right? That's, call the federal agents and the SWAT team and bring them in. The sheriff got involved after they started harassing this farmer and said, listen, you come in here again through the FDA with your agents, and you harass my citizens, the people who elected me to protect their inalienable rights, I will throw you in the county jail and charge you with a felony. He never heard from them again. Right. That is the power of your constitutionally elected sheriff. Yeah.
One last question from online, from Danielle. She says, the local community college needed more money. The school got a bond to tax city property owners. But that didn't stop there. More greed followed, and they took the bond county-wide. And being the city voters outnumbered the county property owners and voters, the bond passed. The county property owners are not happy. How is the best way to nullify the unfair taxation on county land property owners?
Change out your city council and your county commissioners. It's an election. Get people involved. Raise hell. Get out there and tell people, hey, listen, these guys are crooked. They're going way outside of their authority. And after that, get other commissioners in there. Get other city council members in there. Get a new mayor. Get somebody who understands and respects property rights. But I think that's probably about it, unless there's one last question from the audience. Yeah.
Actually, it's two questions.
Sure, go.
Okay.
Breaking the rules already. No.
So one's about the wording of the Constitution and the aspects of how those who wrote how the author of the Constitution refers to God. Nature is God, divine providence, Father of lights. We think originally, not to split hairs here, but usually we think of America as a Christian nation, but originally, if you think about it in that sense, it's a deist nation.
Is that a question or a statement?
Another thing, wait, that was actually, I believe that was a statement, but another thing,
It's okay.
So the other thing is that, well, when we were colonized by the British, the Salutary Neglect Act, wouldn't that, basically, they just left us alone to our own devices, and we could do basically whatever we want. And if I'm correct, the idea of a sort of a freer government was given to us, in a sense, by the British monarchy. Because, well, not literally.
No, the crown, what you said, the crown gave us, keywords, right? Crown doesn't give us anything. You are a naturally occurring person. Your life has inalienable rights to it. You have the right to life, liberty, and property. The crown doesn't give you anything. The only thing that a crown can give you is slavery and then permissions. Same with our federal government. So the crown and the British monarchy never made us more free. People standing up, people saying enough is enough, people asserting their rights as human beings, free beings, said enough. That is what gave us the freedom to be able to interact with each other, to grow our nation, and to become an established oddity of out of which rose the greatest country in history. And so that's where we're going to stop.
I
tonight?
don't mean the crown itself. I mean the ideas that surfaced from the British that we took
From the people.
From the British people. We took some of those ideas and basically incorporated them into, I would say, in the primitive status of what was the United States. For example, take John Locke, the philosopher John Locke. He basically talked about natural rights, like you just said, that no person can have those rights taken away from him. So basically, that's what you're saying is right.
Yeah.
If we can just thank National, the
absolutely.
Social Group, Doug Coulter, the photographer, and the Forsyth GOP.
Yeah.
And the Forsyth women.
Yep. Real quick in closing, and this is for everybody out there. The Forsyth County Republican Party was kind enough to loan us this space for tonight. So thank you to them. Thank you to the Constitutional Grassroots Movement for not only endorsing us, but for sponsoring this event. And also to Doug. Doug we met while we were out knocking on doors. He was a photographer who was here tonight. My extreme appreciation, because photography is not one of those things that is very cheap, and as a grassroots guy, it means the world to us. So thank you guys again for coming out on a Friday night. I hope you learned something. I hope you'll take action, and I hope you'll get out there and spread this message. If you guys want to hang around and talk for a second, I'm all ears. All right, good night everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys around.